And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. End-of-life doulas empower, educate, and encourage people and their families to be involved in making decisions. The word doula is Greek for servant or helper. Like birth doulas support women during the labor process, a death doula supports a person during the dying process. On today's Open Connection, end-of-life educator Jennifer Mallmes.
I grew up in Grand Falls, and then I always wanted to be a nurse. So I went to nursing school at Memorial University. And in my first day of my first practicum, probably my second year of nursing school, I had a lady die in my arms. And it was the most profound thing that I'd ever experienced. Now, I was the person in my family that was called upon to sit with people when they were dying. It was a role that my grandma had given me when I was 9 years old. And she said, "This is your job." And none of my other siblings had that job. None of my other cousins had that job. It was my job to just sit and be quiet and hold a hand if I needed to. So I was really comfortable with end of life and all of that, and nursing. I always wanted to be a nurse. And on this particular day, I went in to give a lady a bed bath, and she sat up in bed and she said, "Could you brush my hair?" And I still remember her hair. It was long, it was silver, it was kind of matted a little bit, but I found a brush and I just started to brush her hair. And at the end, she looked at me and she said, "Thank you." She laid down and she died on my first day of my first practicum. And that stirred up a lot of stuff for me. I didn't feel like I fit in nursing anymore. For some reason, there was something that was pulling at me saying, "This is not for you." So actually, I thought I wanted to do policy and write healthcare policy so that people could experience good death, no matter where they died. I got off the rock. I found that there was a thing called a gerontology degree, and gerontology is the study of aging. And the only place in Canada that offered gerontology was Simon Fraser University. So off I went to Simon Fraser. I lived in Hope for 6 months because I thought Hope was kind of close to Coquitlam on a map.
It looks that way on the map, right?
It does, and coming from Newfoundland, the maps, it's only a 2 or 3 hour, that's got to be close. So I lived in Hope, and then I went to SFU. I did a gerontology and sociology degree, but I focused on death and dying. And there's not a lot of work for people who just have a BA. So I did fall back on my nursing a little bit. And what I did is I offered palliative home care. And for a while I worked for Fraser Health, Vancouver Coastal Health, but I didn't quite fit. Like, I really knew I didn't quite fit because I didn't like staying inside the lines. I wanted to be human and not programmed. So the things that I wanted to do, like give a hug, and they're saying, "No, you can't do that," or make somebody's bed, and they're saying, "No, you can't do that," or take somebody out for their last cigarette when that's the last thing that they want to do. So I didn't find I fit. So I started my own business, and I did that for a while. And then Douglas College actually found me and said, "Do you think you could come and write an end-of-life doula program for me?" And at first I was like, "Yeah, I know what I'm doing. I could write that." And it took me a while, and I got that written. And then they said, "Well, you're going to teach it." I said, "Oh no, I am not a teacher." But they sent me to training for facilitating, and I think I've taught over 80 classes. So I wrote and teach both the End-of-Life Doula program and the Indigenous End-of-Life Guide program. And the reason for the Indigenous End-of-Life Guide was really that death is different in Indigenous communities. We know how to look after our own. We know that there's certain things that the rules it cause barriers for us. We know we want family around. We know we want to die at home. So there's different things that don't happen in regular urban settings even, that happen in rural settings. So I really got passionate about Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous ways of dying, and how deaths were happening in BC, because that's where I live now, but really thinking about how I was brought up by my family, how my grandmother taught me how to take care of people, and knowing that my family now lives in a rural community. They're about 5 hours away from a hospital, so I'm seeing the same kind of things there.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Grace knew that she wanted to have her voice heard throughout her dying process, but was not sure how to do that. And utilizing an end-of-life doula is a holistic way of supporting death. Having an objective, well-trained doula supporting one's end-of-life journey has the possibility of opening amazing doors and offers the person that is dying and their loved ones consistent and reliable support to the end.
Thank you for staying with us. End-of-life care is supportive and compassionate care that focuses on the comfort, quality of life, respect for personal health care, treatment decisions, support for the family, and psychological, cultural, and spiritual concerns for the dying people and their families. Let us return the conversation as Jennifer shares the importance of home.
I'm really passionate about helping people not die away from home in Vancouver because they've gotten airlifted from Terrace or Smithers because they need medical attention at the end of their life, because death is not always a medical event. Like birth, if somebody can give birth to a baby in a swimming pool in their living room, I think we can do beautiful things with people's end-of-life experiences, their journey at home, with the right support and the right pain medication if that's needed. And death is not always painful either. People think that pain correlates with prognosis and that as they get sicker it's going to be more painful, and really there's no real evidence of that. There is good pain medication. There are a few diseases that are painful for sure, but for the most part death is quiet. Death is calm. People go to sleep, and families can take care of their own. They just need the confidence to remember how to do it. The confidence to not think, oh, I need to call the ambulance, or and I'm not saying don't call the ambulance, because sometimes families react and they do want to call the ambulance, and that's fine. It's more about knowing that they can do it, and at the end of the day, them not coming to me and saying, oh, Jennifer, you are our rock. I don't want to be anybody's rock. I want them to say that they could do it on their own and really believe that they've done this, because that's where the ripples are going to go out. If they think they have to depend on me every time somebody is dying, they're not getting that empowerment and being able to carry that on and teach their children and teach the rest of the people around them that, yeah, we could have a good death and it can happen.
You mentioned a word that may not be familiar that we hear all the time, and that one's doula. What does that exactly mean, and how does that, because there's doulas at the beginning of life and also, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the word doula actually means female servant, but cut the female part out, because most caregivers are female, but the way that it's described, so the servant is a person who meets the person where they're at. That is the Greek translation. So a servant who meets the needs of those who are being served. So it's not me serving you how I think you should be served. It's me serving you after asking you what brings you joy, what brings you comfort, what are your most important things, what are your favorite memories, are you afraid of anything? So it's meeting you where you're at based on you, not here's a set of things that I should ask, right? Or this is how I would do it. No, it's nothing to do with me. I have to remove myself and keep myself out of the conversation because it's about you.
Because that was the difficulty you were running into when you worked for Fraser Health, because there were these rules when it comes to palliative care. I mean, we got machines, we got diagnosis, we got everything else. But what you're doing is, that's all aside. You're taking care of that person right there and what their needs are and what their wishes are for a dignified passing.
Yeah, there's also many words to use. You know, some people say dignified, some people say the good death, some people say a quality death. I mean, whatever that means to you, or whatever word you want to use, that's okay. But people sometimes don't have a good death either. So we have to make sure that we're not romanticizing that every death is this beautiful thing, but it can definitely be close. I've seen some beautiful deaths. The approach that I use, it's not a medical approach like we would see in a hospital. It is the palliative approach to care, though. So it is that big overarching way of care, and it's really about getting in there and having conversations early, setting up resources, even if you're not sure if you're going to need them, but have a resource list, have all the supports in place that you may or may not need.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The advantage of family approach to therapy is that it offers an experience that may enable everyone to accept the facts and to work together to enhance the quality of life for the dying person. Let us return to the conversation as Jennifer shares the advantages of alternative therapies.
It might be music therapy, pet therapy, it could be art therapy, it could be spiritual care, it could be drumming or smudging or cedar brushings, whatever is true for you. And I always say, don't fake it till you make it. So if you're not the person who should be doing those things, find the right elder or find whoever should be doing those things. It's also about including the family in the conversations and making sure that the caregivers that are there frontline doing the care, usually the husband, the wife, the son or the daughter, the mom or the dad, make sure that they're taken care of as well, so that they're not putting their lives on hold to support somebody, because the person could be dying for years. I mean, death is not like, oh, you got 6 months to live. It doesn't happen like that anymore. Now it's 10 years, or it can be more when somebody gets a palliative diagnosis. So making sure that they're taken care of all along the way, that they have the right supports in place for the family as well. Yeah, and it's like a philosophy. It's a philosophy of care that is being more accepted now in Canada. Lots of people are using that philosophy of care, and it's really helpful. It really is. If we can encourage families just to communicate with each other, to plan before they need it, because we don't know when we're going to die, but we all know that we will, at some point, we will die, or we'll be caring for somebody who is dying. And it's almost like a gift to leave your loved ones if you have had those conversations and made those plans, so the families aren't in the hallway trying to make decisions that because you can't speak for yourself anymore. Or it also helps, so it reduces that emotional conflict between the others, but leaves you a peace of mind that your wishes are going to be followed. If you do the paperwork right, if you have the right conversations, if you include the right people, if you build that team, it's going to go better for you.
So, you were mentioning that, you have seen there's a big difference between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. What are some of those things that you see in Indigenous communities that kind of make them different or unique?
Yeah, good question. One is that we take care of our own, and there are people that are put in a place. They're called to do a certain job, which I think is great, because people want to do something to help, and people don't always know what to do. But if we know we have a role in that community, it helps to organize who's doing what, right? So I know what my job is, you know. My sister does the baking, right? She's a good cook. They don't want me in the kitchen. That's okay. I don't want to be in the kitchen. But other people will do the finances, and somebody will be calling all the relatives. But we do the work ourselves, and we know that dying at home is a value to us. There's rituals and ceremonies that are present all along the way. And in Vancouver, let's look at the population, it's kind of a melting pot. So people, I call it buffet religion, you know, and maybe I shouldn't say, but people pick up and choose parts that they like and leave the rest. When people identify with being, you know, a certain religion, say you're Jewish, you know that there's certain steps when someone is dying or has died in the Jewish community. There are certain things, certain ceremonies for the next 7 days that take place that guides the family through, and that helps with mourning. It's the same thing in First Nation communities. We know that there's certain steps along the way, and doing those steps is actually helping with the mourning process on the other end for the people who are left behind. So that's a little bit different because you don't get that when people aren't connected to a culture or a religion. You get sometimes chaos and people not knowing where to go next, what to do next. So those are the two biggest things that I would say, is that there's the people who, it's the community presence and the rituals and ceremonies that go with it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Generally speaking, people who are dying need care in 4 areas: physical comfort, mental and emotional needs, spiritual needs, and practical tasks. In this final segment of Open Connection, Jennifer shares how a little planning helps the one who needs it the most.
I have 19 students right now, and a part of the role that I'm playing in there is to advocate for them to have conversations with the health centers, with the hospitals, with the people around their community about what they need. So for example, if you knew that somebody was going to hospital and you knew that a lot of people were going to come and visit, have a conversation with somebody at the hospital. Say, what's the most suitable room? How can we do this? Is there, you know, and it's almost like you're having that conversation instead of asking for forgiveness after, because sometimes,
there are consequences.
But if you know you need to do smudging, this is a part of this person's culture, and you can't do it in a hospital room, well, where can we do it? Can we wheel the person outside? Is there a gazebo? Is there somewhere else? It's almost like being creative, kind of like COVID when people were putting the posters in the window and stuff. But I do advocate for people to let the care team, the professional care team, and the people who are, you know, in charge of the institutions, the hospitals and whatnot, what they need. Same goes for the funeral home. We don't want First Nations people being left to the last minute. A lot of cultures, you need that person home within the 4 days. Sometimes it's 1 day, and that doesn't always happen. But if you're working with a funeral home that you trust and you know that they're going to do everything they can to get that done, it's going to make you feel a little bit better. And I think that will take away that fear of, are we going to get this person put away in time that meets our cultural ways. And every single community has its own way of doing it. Some, you know, have potlatch and have the feast after, and they collect the money and pay for the funeral. Some do it, cut a check as soon as somebody dies, and the funeral home has it before the body's even there. So there's those kind of things, but it's also building those relationships with, you know, the hospice. So Terrace has a hospice society who's there is going to be your champion to make sure that your cultural ways are being taken care of. Do you have an Aboriginal liaison at the hospital? Can they help you? Or do we need one here? So really talking about advocating before you need it. Same thing with the planning before you need it. I've had my advanced care plans done since I was 29. I have no idea when my last day will be or when my last breath will, but I do know what I would want and I wouldn't want, and it probably wouldn't change between now and when I'm 80. What brings me comfort now is probably going to be the same thing that brings me comfort when I need it. So writing things down isn't going to bring death on. It's not a depressing thing. It really is, for me, a way to make sure that when I say I want music, you're not playing country music. I don't want country music, you know? When I say, oh, I'd like my room to have some nice smells, well, what does that mean, right? Like, or, you know, so what I want to hear, what I want to see, I want to make sure that there's a window. I want to make sure that I'm in a room that a window can open. You don't want to be in the back closet or the cast room at the ER because that's the only place that they have for you, right? And know that you can go home in the comforts of your own bed, your own smells, your own comforter, your puppy, your kitty, like things that you can't have at a hospital. But making sure those 5 senses, you know, taste, smell, sound, touch. Do I want to be touched? Do I want you to hold my hand when I'm at my last? I don't want anybody rubbing my feet. So I know that's not going to change. So planning is not really, you know,
Foreboding?
Yeah, really, yeah. It really is helpful for those that are left who are trying to decide what to do, and it helps your quality at the end as well.
So, you know, we kind of briefly touched on a little bit of stuff, but there's a whole bunch more there. If someone actually had questions and they go, well, you know, I need more information or I want to talk to this, how would they go about getting a hold of you?
So I teach my program out of Douglas College, which is located in Coquitlam, but I do travel. Here I am. I travel all over Canada, and especially I try to get to remote reserves. That really, I can see that it really could make a difference. Those fly in, fly out communities, if your loved one is dying, and it would break my heart if they died on transport to a bigger center, if you could keep them at home. Anyway, my email is mallmesj@douglascollege.com. And my program is the End of Life Doula program at Douglas College, or the Indigenous End of Life Guide program at Douglas College.
Maybe for you, maybe you need some mummers to stop by when you're...
Yeah. So well, my last meal, I want a big pot of pea soup. Definitely. My dad wanted seal flippers, so we got them sent up from Newfoundland. But it's not what you want, it's what that person wants. I didn't eat the seal flippers, though.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.